Hey guys, welcome back to Ducks Dash, the University of Oregon show on Dash Sports. I'm Izzy LaRue, and here with me is Michael Strite. Okay, Michael, let's get everything Ducks football. So, Michael, do you think Javon Holland will opt out too now, seeing that Penei Sewell has opted out, Lenore dropped out, and Graham have also opted out too?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for coming back, Izzy. I was lonely last week. I had to hold down the fort. I'm very happy to have you to yell at me about my Panay Sewell takes, among other things. Um, so he opted out. Uh, he was very quickly followed by Diamador Lenore, Thomas Graham Jr., two senior defensive backs opting out. And that does put a spotlight on Javon Holland because while Thomas Graham Jr. and Lenore can both expect to be drafted and have something happen for them in the NFL. Uh, was it Hollywood Vaughn, my man? He's a top 10 draft pick. And it really jumped off the page when I saw him in mock drafts, not just as a guy that's going to get drafted, but a top defensive player out of all the prospects for this year. And so that was really impressive, really blew me away when I saw it at the very end of last year when the first looking ahead to next year mock draft started coming out. I was like, Penei Sewell makes sense, and then Javon Holland, a bit of a surprise. And so the spotlight is on him to see if he's going to opt out. And honestly, I would not be surprised if he did. Nobody knows where his head's at right now, but it just not only does it make sense for him for the same reasons that it makes so much sense for Penei Sewell to just fully prepare for the NFL and just take that stress of an extra college season and all the COVID stuff out of it and just try to, secure that bag in the NFL. But then to make it even easier, he already has the cover of all his teammates doing it. Penei Sewell did it first. He got sort of the big statement out there, and it's very easy for everyone to just follow after him and just kind of keep the train going of seniors that are getting out.
Yeah, right now, I really appreciate it seeing that he's staying right now. He's showing a lot of loyalty to Oregon because when he committed at Bishop O'Dowd in Oakland, he committed for playing for the Ducks for at least 3 years until he's draft eligible, which he now is, kind of being with this weird kind of season. So it really shows a lot of loyalty, and teams are going to take notice of that kind of loyalty because when teams draft players, they're looking like, oh, what can you do on the field? But not only that, they also look what can he do off the field too. And he's showing a lot of character staying at Oregon, not opting out yet. And I also think that he hasn't opted out too because he's kind of waiting to see what the Pac-12 does because the Big Ten, they've already decided to restart in late October. And now there's rumors swirling around, is the Pac-12 coming early November, late October? We don't know yet. So I feel like he's kind of feeling that out too. And also, even if he might opt out, he may come back because you saw with another high DB prospect in Sean Wade at the Ohio State University. He opted out, but once the Big Ten decided to come back, he's like, all right, I'm staying with you guys this year. I'm playing. So that's really nice to see.
Yeah, well, if you do opt out, there's a lot of different things that can make you ineligible, like hiring an agent, stuff like that. But there's also a way to become re-eligible. I asked that question on Twitter in regards to Penei Sewell because I want that Heisman campaign to keep rolling. It is possible. There's a path back to eligibility if the player obviously wants to. And for Javon Holland, I think it is exactly what you said, which is just waiting it out. I mean, we don't know what's happening. We know the Big Ten's back. We know the Pac-12 is talking about it. Every day there's another news story about what the latest update is on that. And he just wants to see, one, if there's going to be football before Christmas, for him, for Oregon. And then two, who's going to play. I mean, whether Thomas Graham and Lenore want to come back, what other seniors are saying, because there's other seniors still that could think about leaving, and just the entire environment about, who he's going to be playing with. I mean, especially on the defense, because he's already lost the two other best defensive backs on the team. So it's a big question about whether his guys, his teammates, his brothers are going to be there with him on the field, and whether or not it's even going to be playing. But if there is any more of a sort of delay, and if the Pac-12 does stumble and does not end up getting back to football, I definitely think Javon Holland is out. And I think that just has everything to do with what he has to lose versus what he has to gain. And you talked about the loyalty aspect. You talked about being seen as a team leader. But at this point, it raises the question of how much higher his draft stock can go. I mean, sure, he may not end up being a top 10 draft pick, but people want to take him right now in the top half of the first round, and that's all you can ask for if you're Javon Holland. You're not going to get greedy and want anymore. You're getting millions of dollars on that signing bonus if you're taken in the top half of the first round, and I'm sure that that's something you want to protect and not something you want to put in jeopardy.
Yeah, and we mentioned it before, like LSU safety Grant Delpit, he was in the same situation as Javon Holland is this year, where he was projected before the season started to be in the top 10, and then as the season went on, his play kind of declined because he had injuries and he didn't play some games, so he fell all the way to the second round. And you mentioned it, he lost a lot of money going all the way to the second round compared to top 10 draft pick to second rounder. There's a big money difference. And because of that, that's why like he has to opt out of the season, because not only because we mentioned the three guys who have opted out, but when you add that to who left after Oregon won their Rose Bowl, Herbert left, four starting O linemen left, Troy Dye left. So now you're looking at a Ducks team where basically you need two new starting corners, a whole entire new starting O line, a new quarterback, and a new starting linebackers too. I mean, he's looking around like now. It's like that Will Smith meme. He's looking around, or like you can,
That's exactly what it is. I mean,
yeah, or that Pulp Fiction meme, yeah,
walking
with
into
John
Austin Stadium
Travolta,
just
yeah.
like Will Smith in that empty house. He's looking around and he's like, Justin, Panay, Thomas Graham, where are you guys? And he's going to say, all right, it's time for me to get out. So, yeah, it's going to be weird because if he does opt out, that's a very easy conversation. It's like, okay, it makes sense. Totally got it. I wonder what the conversation is going to be if he just kind of ends up wanting to play. I mean, are we going to criticize him for it? Not exactly. You can't really criticize a guy for wanting to play football like that, wanting to play with Mario and wear the Ducks uniform some more. You can't really criticize that, but it is a potential Grant Delpit situation. I'm really glad you brought that up because it is such a mirror to what is happening to Javon right now, because this is a safety that was a projected top 10 pick. And the crazy thing is his team had the perfect season. And you'd think if you're a top prospect on a team having a perfect season, you're looking great. But he just kind of slipped back, and his stock definitely declined, and he left a lot of money on the table. It's almost weird to imagine, although I'm sure he would take a college football championship in that season, but it's almost weird to think that if he opted out at the beginning of the year, was he going to be like the 13th pick, 14th pick? I mean, what was going to happen with him? How was that going to shake out for sure?
Yeah, I know. It's just it was hard to see that, but also injuries wise, like that, like every single people talk about college football, they always want players who can not play that fourth year to do it, because that's an extra year of maybe you can get injured and potentially not be drafted at all. Like in college basketball, they do the same thing too, where the top prospects, they only want them to play 1 year, because when you play longer, you're more at risk to get injured. And when you get injured, it's kind of a cutthroat business. It is. So even though if you have the stats, the film, the character, everything that a team's looking for, if you're injured, they're not going to want to take you. It's just simple as that. And with Grant too, it showed why teams didn't want to take him, because during training camp right before the season started, he tore his ACL, and that's really nothing you can do against. But if you're having calf injuries and leg injuries in college football, you kind of look into that and be like, that's why it makes sense. So I hope he opts out. He makes the right decision. I mean, no one is gonna knock him if he opts out. No one did with Sewell. Everyone was very supportive of him. They're like, yes, go be drafted. We want you to do well in the NFL. That's the same with Holland too. We want him to do well in the NFL. We want more Ducks doing great in the NFL.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a great class of Ducks that is already pushing their way into the NFL, that is breaking through in the NFL, and Duck fans are just as happy to see more Oregon players out there.
All right, Michael, let's switch over to our next topic to is the Pac-12 going to have an early restart? We already talked about it, just touched about a little earlier. So, Michael, do you think the Pac-12 will restart like like the Big Ten did?
Yeah, this is going to be a big conversation. This is going to be there's a lot going on. It's like I said, there's updates coming out about this every day. You got to lay out the timeline. So first, you get the Pac-12 and Big Ten basically back to back, saying season is postponed until at least January. Forget about it. It's not happening. And that was kind of done with the expectation that the NCAA was going to enforce that across college football, that the other conferences were having similar discussions, they were going to come to similar conclusions. And then you get them caught in this really weird situation where Clemson's playing, Alabama's playing, the Big 12, Oklahoma's playing. They're all firing up their seasons like COVID isn't a thing. And so that put a lot of pressure on the Pac 12 and the Big 10, a lot more so on the Big 10 because they had a few schools that really didn't want the season to get postponed, especially Ohio State. I mean, it literally got to the point where moms of football players were protesting outside Big Ten headquarters. And so then you have a breakthrough that, a scientific breakthrough that sort of definitely allowed the seasons to come back on, but also gave sort of a shield or a blanket, safety blanket for these conferences to backtrack and say, now we're playing because of this. And what that is that there's a new test for coronavirus that is FDA approved, that is super cheap and gives you results back super fast. So it's completely changed the landscape of these sports in terms of being able to very quickly get results back about all these players. And even though you're seeing a lot of football games still get postponed due to COVID across college football right now, you're also seeing a lot of games that are happening because these teams are able to manage it and able to keep everything contained. And, you know, this weekend coming up, we're going to see a whole bunch more games. You're going to see the SEC finally start to get rolling with the Bamas and Georgias of the world heading out on the field. So that is the whole timeline. I mean, the Big Ten comes back. The Pac-12 is talking about come back. It seems like almost, only the Pac-12 could possibly do this, but it seems like they're going to come back simply because it's so funny to imagine a world where all the other conferences are playing and the Pac-12 is like, nah, we're good.
Yeah, and to say one thing about the test that you were talking about. So that test that the Big Ten's taking, apparently that it's not really viable. It has like so the way that it works, the ones that they're using, it catches up on the protein for the COVID-19 virus. And so there's still, if you test positive with that test, that one that comes in with like less than like 12 hours, something like that, like instant, one of those instant tests, then you have to get this other kind of COVID-19 test that teams in the NFL are taking, where it's the legit one where it takes a full day for test results to come back. So yeah, it's cool that they're getting all these new kind of tests, but I feel like I want players to be taking the right kind of tests, because in the NBA bubble, they've been taking the ones that you were talking about, the ones like the instant feedback, because they're in a bubble setting, so there's no outside forces coming in, there's no outside variables that can change their environment, because before everyone came in, they all had to test negative, which everyone did, and since then there's been no positive tests. But with college football right now, with teams traveling across the country, interacting with friends, either family members, that test isn't really going to work. They need the more expensive one, which I know these Power Five schools, those Power Five conferences, they have the money to do that, because football is a big they generate a lot of revenue. So I want to see those schools taking the right kind of tests, not the cheap ones, but the right ones.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And looking at the just entire landscape of hosting pro sports right now in America, the pro sports are doing a fantastic job with it. I mean, the NBA had a bit of a rocky start with some sort of quarantine violations and some issues with the bubble. It's been seamless since then. The MLB, I mean, they had so many teams having problems and postponements. they're moving along pretty smoothly now. They're doing really well. The only time a game gets postponed is due to a false positive test now for the MLB. And the NFL has just started, but it is really impressive the amount of positives they have. I mean, the lack of positives they have, and just negative tests all across the board. The difference is that we're talking about college students here, and we're talking about a lot more social interaction, campuses opening up, and just a lot more places for stuff to go wrong. And you're already seeing stuff go wrong with, all over Twitter. It's like, I'm not paying attention to all these games which ones are happening, which ones aren't, but I am seeing games get postponed, every week on Twitter. I'm seeing, oh, this game's now postponed. Oh, this one's now postponed. I mean, College Game Day, Fox's big noon kickoff is what they call it or whatever. These guys are going to cities, they're going to places for games, and then those games are getting postponed, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's brutal. And I think they're experiencing the same rocky start that the pro leagues did, and I think they're going to be able to get it under control, and I think it is going to sort of work itself out. And another part of the conversation that is important is what a lot of Pac-12 players are saying is, just tell us what the risks are and let us opt out if we want to. I mean, these are 18 to 21-year-olds. These are adults that if they say, I don't want to be exposed like this, they're not going to burn eligibility. They can sit out and just keep, take their online classes and just play some more football next year. If somebody is really, nervous about this, the NCAA has set it up so that there is no real punishment for saying I don't want to play. And that means that the door is open for everyone that wants to just jump in and be all about it.
Yeah, and you're talking about people opting out and stuff when we did that our last topic, but that's a big reason why the Big Ten came back, because they saw a lot of their top prospects either opting out or even wanting to transfer to the SEC, ACC, and the Big 12, because they're like, well, my conference isn't playing. Why can't I just transfer over there and play there? It doesn't make sense for me just to sit out and do nothing. Like, I want to play football. So that was a major reason why the Big Ten came back. It's just you hate to see it, because it seems like this whole entire thing kind of blew up in the Big Ten and Pac-12's faces. Because like Big Ten, they mentioned it, they announced it first how they were canceling all fall sports, and then Pac-12 hours later they came back even with harder restrictions, saying we're not going to have any sports until at least January of next year. That's when we're going to decide if we're to do the rest of our sports. And so now, because at that moment, everyone thought that, oh, the SEC is going to fall into peer pressure, ACC, Big 12. Everyone thought that they were going to fall into peer pressure, but the SEC and ACC and Big 12, they all stood their ground. They're like, nope, we're going to keep going. Our experts say that it's okay as long as we take the right precautions. And then now you see this with games being played already, and SEC's about to start their season. It's kind of like it kind of flip-flops the peer pressure. Now it's like, wait, why aren't you guys playing to the Big Ten and Pac-12? And so the Big Ten, they caved in. Now they announced that they're coming back, and now all eyes are on the Pac-12, and everyone's like, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to come back early November, late October, or are you going to stick with your spring football kind of season? So it's a hot mess right now. Peer pressure is a funny thing, Michael.
Yeah, it is. And I think this opens up a broader discussion about COVID in America and how it's been handled in the United States, because what you've seen is in those last 4 to 12 weeks, which is the time frame between all of what we're talking about with the postponements and then the bringing back and everything happening, you've seen a shift in America about how COVID is being treated, I guess, because at first they were treating it like every other country, which was, we need to prevent this and we need to slow this down with everything we got, cancel everything, everyone stay inside, we're shutting the whole country down. And then as things drew on and reopened too soon, it's gotten to a point where economically the United States is just too battered to do that again. And it's been a shift to let's all just coexist with this and let's sort of figure out ways to live through this COVID pandemic and to just accept that it's happening. And that shift has everything to do, and it has all these parallels to what we're seeing with sports being like, oh, of course we can't play sports because someone's going to die. I mean, honestly, a season, you could make the argument that the college football season is going to result in at least one or two or three deaths. I don't know how directly or how indirectly, whether it actually ends up being a player, whether it's a coach, whether it's just a mom or a father or something like that. It's going to have some kind of ripple effect. And because of that, that's why everything got canceled. I remember being sad about March Madness being canceled, and I told myself, at the end of the day, if March Madness happened, people would die because it happened, right? Like there would be more deaths because of it. And I just had to accept the fact that this was a life-saving thing. And now we've gotten to a point where the same logic has been applied and applied. And, as a country, we've sort of moved away from that philosophy. The curve has been flattened per se. There isn't a crazy spike of cases now. It's just kind of a steady load of like, we're just going to ride it out. And that's what it's come down to is you got to push forward. You got to ride it out. And this season's just going to keep pushing. We're all just kind of living in this world now. It's a weird shift that we've seen.
Yeah, and even if Oregon decides to restart, they have to kind of make that decision soon because the way the Big Ten is doing it, they're starting October 23rd, 24th. They're going to have 8 games, and that's going to be enough to be in college football playoff contention because the last day game days for them is a day before the college football playoff committee decides who's who like seating wise. And if Pac-12, if they decide to go with this November 7th date, which has been a day has been kind of thrown around, rumored, they're not going to be in contention for college football playoff play. They're not going to have enough games under their belt or a strong enough season. Oregon won't to be considered to be in that college football playoffs. So I think if they're going to do it, they have to do it within the next week. I hope by next show we'll be talking about Pac-12 is coming back because if not, Pac-12 it's in trouble, Michael.
Yeah, I think our one of these tags below us next week is either going to be Pac-12 football is back or what are they doing? What's going on? Pac-12 is in trouble because things need to get moving soon. This is really funny to think about the college football playoff conversation because that is why the Big Ten is doing it the weekend they're trying to do it is because they want to get those games in to be eligible and to be with those other conferences in the mix. What's funny about the Pac-12 is that the Pac-12 in a normal year has a hard time putting up a candidate for the college football playoff. I mean, they have the worst track record of all the conferences of performing at the college football playoff level. And even if you set things up so that technically the Pac-12 teams were eligible because they played enough games, you're going to have a really hard time convincing me that anybody in the Pac-12 is in that conversation because when they're playing just against themselves, you're seeing a lot of this Pac-12 after dark, this Pac-12 cannibalization that happens where teams are just beating up on each other. And then what you get is nobody goes undefeated. I really don't think anybody's going undefeated in the Pac-12 this year. And even if someone does, they're in a really uphill battle because they played a bunch of Pac-12 schools. And that's just the reputation of the Pac-12. So
yeah.
I really do laugh a little bit when we talk about what the Pac-12 is doing for their college football playoff hopes because it's just so many hurdles they have to jump over to get to the point where they're like a 4 seed playing against the 1 seed and they just get destroyed.
Yeah. So that brings us to our last topic of the day. How would have Oregon fared against South Dakota State? And Michael, I think I already know what you're going to say, but give the listeners what your opinion is.
Yeah, this was a really fun game that a lot of us were looking forward to. It was something that really had some buzz when it came up on the schedule, too, because South Dakota State, as some of you know, is an FCS powerhouse. They are consistently the best team in the FCS, right below the FBS. And so they love to schedule these big-time FBS schools to play.
Wait, Michael, I think you're getting confused with North Dakota State.
Okay. I mean, those are the top two. I mean, North Dakota
Yeah.
State, South Dakota State, these guys. But schools like this that are at the top of the FCS, they love to schedule these FBS schools to have those statement wins to say, oh, we beat this school, we beat this school, like kind of rub it in their faces. And that's what you're seeing is South Dakota State. That was a really intriguing, exciting matchup, just in terms of the way that they played football, the prospects they had on their team, the fact they were coming to Autzen, and also the potential for sort of a college game day visit. Now you're talking hypothetical, but looking at the schedule, there was a possibility that college game day would have come for the Oregon-Ohio State game, but there was also a lot of other big games because it was the opening week. The week after that was also a very attractive spot for college football game day to come and visit Autzen that week. And sort of they love to sort of have 1 week where they give a shine to an FCS school as well. They would probably want the excuse to come back to Eugene, stuff like that. That was all going to be a lot of cool buzz. In terms of the game itself, I think Oregon would comfortably win. I think they would take care of business. But it's one of those situations where it's kind of like Oregon-Ohio State, where Ohio State is definitely better and they definitely should win. But the gap is at least close enough to entertain the possibility of an upset. And you're like, okay, but you got to take them seriously. Ohio State would have to take Oregon seriously. They couldn't have an off day. And Oregon would definitely have to take South Dakota State seriously. They would not be able to afford having a bad day, a bad game.
Yeah, when I looked at it, I kind of looked at it as like, oh, easy win type of game. But I now I look at it, I really think that, like you said, Oregon has to take them seriously because especially with teams like that, you can't play down to their level because that's what those type of teams love. They love it when a team of higher caliber plays down to their level because then they have a shot at winning and upsetting the game. And actually, last year they almost beat Minnesota and their
Yeah, Minnesota was really good.
yeah, Minnesota was 11-2. They beat Auburn to win what was it, the Outback Bowl. It was a really good game. Yeah, they had a really good season last year. And South Dakota, they only lost by a touchdown. So they were really feeling really good about themselves after that game, and they went on to have a great season. So coming into Autzen, they would have, I guarantee you, all the players would have loved to play in Autzen. Autzen's a great place to play. It's one of the top Pac-12 stadiums ever. So I feel like even though it would have been an easy one, it would have been, like you said, it would have been like a cool matchup to see how Oregon would have done against the lower caliber team. Because in those games, even though the Ohio State would have been more telling of how Oregon would have fared throughout the season, that I feel like that game would have shown more of what Oregon was about. Because if they played their game, didn't play it down to them, and won easily, that would have said, okay, this Ducks team, they're sound. They're ready to make some noise again.
If that game was close, then we would all be saying this Oregon team has a lot of work to do. If that game was dominant and if it was just a blowout, then we're saying, oh, okay, Oregon's they're really pushing for an undefeated year in the Pac-12. And as we kind of move ahead, look towards next week, stay tuned, I guess, because every day there's going to be updates about what Pac-12 football is this year. I was mind blown this morning. I saw Mario Cristobal tweeting out a GIF of an ice cream scooping some ice cream, and I was like, what's going on? What does this mean? It was like #GoDucks. I was like, is this Pac-12 related? Is this football related? I tweeted it to my friends. I sent it to my friends, like, what's going on here? And my friend just responds. He goes, they signed a recruit whose nickname is Scoops. And I was like, oh, okay. I was freaking out. I was like, what is this messaging he's trying to send us? And I'm like, oh, they got a guy named Scoops. Cool. Love that. Beautiful.
You thought that he was tweeting out free ice cream at Autzen, Michael?
Yeah, no, I was trying to decipher it. I was doing the Da Vinci Code and everything. I was like, where are we at? What's going on here? And it was just like, oh, we got a guy named Scoops that's going to play for us? Thanks. Love it.
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of nice recruits over the past couple months, so that's going to be exciting. We're definitely going to be touching up on that in the next couple episodes. But before we end, I just want to say something real quick. I want to welcome the Oregon State Dash to Dash Sports. We finally got some hosts for that school. I've seen all the talking you guys have been doing. Just keep talking. We'll have our crossover episode pretty soon. And to close out now, guys, we're doing columns now, so check out sportspac12.com where you can find columns from every Dash Sports show. And look out for my Ducks column dropping tomorrow. It's gonna be talking about. I'm gonna go more in depth about Javon Holland and what he should do. And thanks for joining us today. Make sure to follow us at Dash Sports TV on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and dashsports.tv. Check out our website. Make sure to catch our weekly shows Fridays at 5 p.m.